What we're talking about here today is really important, and it's really triggering and anxiety-inducing for a lot of us here and a lot of us watching. And I think it's really important to take a trauma-informed lens to how we support each other, and that includes in these kind of spaces as well. And so, you know, when folks are running a little bit late, like I am a-okay with just taking a breather for a second. And I want to totally thank you all for being here. This is really, really great. I know this is last minute. This is not something I had ever thought I would be doing, nor something I thought I would need to do even last week. But as you will all see, my dive into the horribleness that is hexachloroethane smoke has led me to find some documents that make me really concerned for people in Portland and around the country, especially tomorrow with Inauguration Day, but also beyond. And so, like, that's why we're here. This research is really important, and we could share it a lot of days, but the reason why we're here right now today is because I want to be proactive and get information out. I don't want to be retroactively explaining what happened when somebody died or was seriously injured in some random place in some other part of the country where they had these grenades and used them without knowing what they are. So that's why we're here today. You good? Okay. Oh, you're good.
So sorry.
No, it's okay. So we're
don't
just.
know what happened. Could have been when I was bumping it around in the trunk.
It's totally fine.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. And right now I'm gonna turn the floor over to Red and Koska, who will be doing the land acknowledgement.
I hope you can hear me. I go by Hufayat, that's my Indian name. It was given to me when I was really young through a ceremony. And I'm going to read some stuff just because it's very hard for me to remember all the tribes. I'm sorry I don't have that all down yet, but there's a lot of tribes. First I'm going to start with a little bit of our language, Nishmaitske, and that means good morning in Sahaptin. The land we stand on is the indigenous land of Chinook people. The Chinook people were colonized and spread across the tribes in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. A lot of people don't actually know that part. The 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon that the Chinook people are represented in is the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sissilaw Indians, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz, Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Reservation, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians, Coquille Indian Tribe, and Klamath Tribes. And within each of these tribes is multiple tribes that were kind of just clumped together by the government. Some weren't even tribes that got along with each other, and they were all just clumped together as one. The Chinook people can be found in the Cowlitz, Siletz, Grand Ronde, Wasco, and even Yakima tribes. So my mother told me a story about the Willamette Falls. And when she was younger, her parents would come up to the Willamette Falls and they would talk about how our ancestors actually helped the pilgrims come over to Oregon City and basically settle at Willamette Falls. And what they used to call the swirls in the water, that was called wool wool in our language. So they called it wool wool. And lump is blue. And so it was wool lump. They would call it wool lump falls. So that is how basically we learned of, or we know of it being called Willamette Falls. Sorry. we belong to this land. We need to recognize how powerful this earth that we stand on is. We need to recognize the negative effects that we can have on it. We need to take care of the land the same way that the land takes care of us. And I'm going to end with one of the ways that we show respect to the land in our culture is before we have a meal, we sing prayer songs, and then we all have a little bit of water that we pour out in front of us. And before we have our meal, we have to say chush, which means water in our language, because water is sacred. So that's how we acknowledge our land. So, chush. And then Tosca can say a few words.
Good morning, good afternoon. My indigenous name is Tosca. My legal name is Tracy Molina. I grew up in Siletz, Oregon. That used to be the coastal reservation until they split it into Grand Island and Siletz. I was raised there, grew up knowing some Chinook words because it was a language that was spoken up and down the coast. It was also once had a newspaper written in it and everything. So I'm just going to share a little bit about Chinook people I know in my life, people that I've met here, people that I'm related to. My children are enrolled in the Siletz tribe, and I also have relatives that are Longhouse people from Yakima, and legal brothers up there, and they're from the Yakima Elder. They want us. They told us over and over again about what my sister said about the Jewish, about the water is the most important thing, and it's important to remember that the Chinook people and descendants are not gone. They were being tear gassed here with us. We know some of them. We're related to some of them. The Chinook people aren't gone. They're still here, and we need to remember that for the most important thing is the water and the salmon. And the salmon are already struggling in Oregon. 2 or 3 rivers no longer have a spring Chinook salmon run. And we have ceremonies, the people have ceremonies tied to those that have been going on for thousands of years, and they're not going on anymore because of the poisoning and the climate change that continues to happen, the overlogging that continues to happen. So I just wanted to say that much, to remember the salmon, and remember that Chinook people are not gone, they're still here with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for saying that and for acknowledging the space that we're in. And as will become evident, as Koska brought up, the tear gassing and the pollution that's happening is part of a legacy, and it continues to travel into the water and horribly negatively affect salmon and people and other mammals that rely on them. Only so much room. Hi, everybody. Good morning. So my name is Dr. Juniper L. Simonis. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the owner and lead scientist of Dapper Stats. This is what I do normally for my job. I'm a computational statistical ecologist. And I'm also now the founder of the Chemical Weapons Research Consortium, interlab group designed to collaborate and share information about chemical weapons and their impacts on the environment and people. My degree is in ecology and evolutionary biology from Cornell University. I've published over 20 peer-reviewed scientific papers and over 50 scientific technical reports. I have over 2 decades of scientific research experience, including aquatic ecology, biogeochemistry, and environmental toxicology. The work that I'll be speaking about today was funded 100% through my company, which is just through me. And so I can declare explicitly that there are no financial conflicts of interest. The purpose of this press conference is to inform the public here in Portland and around the country of the significant human and environmental dangers posed by law enforcement's use of munition smokes. The life-threatening aspects of these smokes have been known for 3/4 of a century, yet have been systematically removed from safety data sheets by manufacturers and intentionally ignored by police. In advance of J20, where it is expected that protesters, counter-protesters, and police will meet in cities around the country, I believe it is my duty as a scientist engaged in research for the public good to share this vital information that was produced here in Portland over the entire 100+ days of things that we have learned from firsthand experience. I believe that lives are very much at risk, and I prefer to inform proactively as opposed to explaining retroactively. So stepping back in time, right here to July 16th, 2020, at the height of the summer's protests in support of Black lives and racial justice and against federal occupation, when Department of Homeland Security agents deployed what could only be described as an unholy thurible to disperse chemical agents into the crowd. As you can see in this video that Tuck Woodstock took at the time and documented, they literally used this as a means to spread tear gas, as they thought it was, or munition smoke through the crowd. Within minutes, reports also began appearing of novel, severe, and completely unexpected symptoms, like chemical rashes. Eventually people were losing hair. I'm sorry, there's a number of us that swear regularly on Twitter, and this just got pulled in. Like, this was how people felt in the moment. People who were supposed to be acting professionally are tweeting, like, just horribly how they're feeling, right? And it's just so raw and direct. Seasoned and new protesters alike were suddenly vomiting, having difficulty breathing, experiencing chemical burns. Many were bedridden for days, lethargic, losing hair and weight, and feeling like they were going to die hours or days later. This is all so well documented on Twitter, right? Despite other agencies or media not necessarily documenting this, we do have a great record of what happened here in Portland over these 2 weeks in particular because of what people wrote on Twitter. And we have to thank everybody who lives their lives publicly for being able to document this so that I could do the work that I'm showing you and so that other people can learn without having to go through it themselves. In addition to people, trees, like our friend, the troubled tilia right there, which is right over there, and these mighty American elms that were below, suddenly experienced significant defoliation. So the loss of leaves, defoliation. And the stormwater trap that's right back over there, when sampled by BES, even though they decided to downplay this result, this sheet is in the pamphlet. You can see that heavy metal concentrations and chlorate concentrations are 3 to 10 times higher in that stormwater drain. That drain goes directly into the Willamette River untreated, where Chinook salmon den, lay their eggs, rear, and go out to the sea. Those salmon get eaten by people and get eaten by sea lions. These heavy metals all bioaccumulate. Significant community-driven research, which is detailed in the report that's in there, and that's also online, the report that's in the document, has identified this, the causal agent as HC smoke, right? Very, very briefly, HC smoke was designed after World War I by the U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service as an obscurant smoke for use in open fields and on the water to shield battleships from bomber planes, to shield tank movements from strafing runs. It was not designed to be used in enclosed spaces. People decide that this is somehow outdoors, but we are in an enclosed space, especially in the summertime here when the canopy is full and there are cars and tents and everything here. We are in an enclosed space. This was not designed to be used near people, let alone in an enclosed space. It was designed to be used on open water. But by the Second World War, the lethality of it was very well known. And so here we'll see a very quick deployment of how DHS is using this. Smoke that was designed to be in an open field, tossed right over in that street when nobody is around, when they've got 50 agents just walking back into the garage for no reason. They throw the fifth in a string of 5 in a block of these grenades. Any one of them can kill 9 people. And again, this information, the lethality, is well documented. This is not hidden. This is not ivory tower research or, only happening in Antifa garages. This was done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Produced fatalities when used by 1944. So much so that in 2012, CERDEP, which is like one of the defense agencies, like research arm, published an redacted document saying that it's like baseline usage produces hydrogen chloride and zinc chloride and phosgene that are above OSHA permissible exposure level limits. So we're not just talking about impacts on protesters, we're also talking about the impacts on all those other agents around. And I'm not going to get into the science too much behind it, but basically, oops, that's too far ahead. HC is really a chemical reaction in a bottle. And the significant human and environmental health risks come from both the hexachloroethane, which is what HC stands for, and these products that are produced, right? So they're selling you a chemical reaction in a bottle. What's a reagent in there is a listed EPA what's listed, or what's in there as a reagent, is an EPA listed hazardous waste, hexachloroethane. What comes out is predominantly zinc chloride gas. 75% of the weight of what comes out of one of those grenades is zinc chloride gas that's molten and literally ready to react in a very aggressive way. Zinc chloride combines the corrosive irritation of bleach vapor, which is what the chloride ions do, and the poisoning capacity of zinc metal fumes, which will be familiar to welders as something that will cause metal fume fever, a form of heavy metal poisoning. The lethality of HC smoke, even when used as intended, has been well established to be bad. No more consequential, to my understanding of the development and the use that brings us to where we are today, is a story that I just recently found that allowed me more of an insight into the use and development of this weapon and my concern for people immediately. Long story short, in June of 1998, in a federal corrections facility in northern Minnesota, there was a group of agents or officers engaging in a regular sort of hostage situation drill. They were supposed to throw a flashbang. They didn't have a flashbang, and so plan B was a smoke grenade, and the smoke grenade happened to be a hexachloroethane smoke grenade. They were in a stairwell. The grenade bounced off the wall and fell back down at their feet, and it instantly engulfed them in smoke. They did not have gas masks on, and they were in a stairwell. They were supposed to wait for the smoke to clear to go up. None of them waited. None of the second group behind them waited. They ran through because they were all immediately feeling the effects. And you can see that here, that all of these members of these teams ended up having to go seek significant medical attention. And the symptoms that they experienced are completely familiar to those of us that were here in July. Several members were having spells of headaches and were puking. I don't know why you need air quotes around puking. Everyone was choking, spitting up. Later had chills, heavy chest, black mucus. It took me about 5 days to get over the heavy chest feeling, right? Like, these symptoms, as I'm reading through this after action report, are just ringing similarities to what I and others experienced. As I found in this document from this court report, the weapon that was used there was our friend, the military-style HC smoke from Defense Technology. And lo and behold, it also had the material safety data sheet from 1993 that Defense Technology produced with that weapon. And what you'll notice here are the hazardous decomposition products. I'm going to be sort of drawing this through a couple of series of safety data sheets, and that's the line that we're going to be looking at across all of them, right? The hazardous decomposition products. And so we have CCl4, C2CL4, aluminum oxide, and zinc chloride. Right, and that's the big one, zinc chloride, right? That's the thing that is like causing lethality in people. So Defense Technology, here's their 1993 safety data sheet, what I just showed you, right? Here's their 2004 one that I found off the Wayback Machine. Same thing, got the same information. Great. In 2008, Defense Technology settled with the Federal Bureau of Prisons employee for an undisclosed amount. And that employee also got a six-figure settlement from the Federal Department of Labor for workers' compensation. And so we have two departments at the federal executive level that are aware of this situation specifically through this case alone. But this happens in 2008. And then somehow in 2011, after that settlement, the next MSDS I can find, which is an archive, now says the hazardous decomposition byproducts include nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, lead oxides, carbon dioxide, and lead dust and fume. We've lost all of the other things that were actually listed before. Yes, these are hazardous byproducts, but so too were the things that were listed before. And now in 2015, it's trimmed down even further. So this is their one that's up on their website right now. And it just says carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur oxides. So as you can tell, there's been a systematic removal of the most hazardous compounds from the material safety data sheet. And in specific, it happened coincidingly with this lawsuit. This is where it gets so laughably absurd in the horribly black humor way. So the NFPA ratings, so that's the National Fire Protection Association ratings, give you health, fire, and reactivity on a scale of 0 to 4. defense technology currently rates our friend, the maximum smoke military style HC, as having a 0 health rating. That is despite hexachloroethane having a 2 health rating, zinc oxide having a 2 health rating, and zinc chloride in its solid form, not in its molten gaseous form, having a 3 health. Nobody sells gaseous zinc chloride, so you can't find like the safety data sheet for that, because that's like not something you're going to sell to somebody. My guess is it would be a 4, right? It's not supposed to be exposed to anybody in an enclosed space. 4 means it's basically has a high probability of killing you, right? So like this is what they have now rated that basically death machine in a bottle, right, that can kill 9 people with its output, as a 0 health. And this is in comparison to, sorry for the washout, their quote-unquote safe smoke, which they rate as having a 2 health. And then they literally say on their page, the safe smoke formulation is considered to be less toxic than hexachloroethane. But they rate it as a 2 on health, and they rate hexachloroethane as a 0 on health. So the internal inconsistencies are glaring. And when an individual who, say, is purchasing things for a department is looking at health ratings and they see a 0 or a 2, they might not read this. They might think this hexachloroethane is actually the safest smoke that you can buy, because it is literally rated like that out of the available options. This is a huge concern because of how law enforcement, including our own Portland Police Bureau, do not understand even the severity of using safe smoke style smoke, which is known as terephthalic acid smoke, right? Like, just to flip back here, safe smoke has a 2 health rating. That means it's hazardous to your health. Yet Portland Police Bureau labels it as inert smoke and treats it as if it's okay to throw into a crowd of people, which is an off-label usage. It's meant not to be used on people. This goes further when we have media outlets like the Oregonian and the Portland Tribune taking those statements like inert smoke word for word and putting them in their reporting, right? Then what gets reported out, not only to the people that were here, but to the people around the city and the people around the country, is that smoke that's being used is inert, when it is not. Whether it's safe smoke or, more severely, if it's hexachloroethane smoke, it is not inert. This goes even more ridiculously because the Portland Police Bureau decides that they would like to label protesters as throwing caustic substances on them in paint balloons, when their officers are literally walking through the caustic smoke that they have thrown, right? So they don't understand the impact of their smoke on themselves, let alone on other protesters. And this gets really, really scary when you dig into the invoice that Portland Police Bureau has put up online, where it is listed from 2018 that they have potentially bought, is in this like 6-pack, 12-pack or whatever mix bag of weapons, HC smoke. They don't have it listed on their documents, but that doesn't mean that they don't have it. And while we've seen a decrease in the usage basically here since of HC since the end of July, when the feds pulled inside, they did not go away, they just pulled inside the building. We have in fact seen them use HC at the ICE building at the end of October. And this is a point for me to point out. Do not pour water on HC. It's not a good idea to pour them on any of these, but definitely do not pour it on HC. That will literally cause it to explode. It's burning at probably 1600 degrees C. It will literally split the water molecules and the hydrogen gas explodes and it makes it really bad. So get away from it, get out of the area. Don't try to put it out. Beyond Portland, I've had people from Denver reach out to me because they have found that officers used or possibly used hexachloroethane smoke. It's on the list of things that they potentially have. And in advance of the 2020 Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee in July, the police department got a bid for a vast armory of weapons, including 60 hexachloroethane smoke grenades at a price of $32.89 each. For the low price of under $33, you can kill 9 people, right? Like you could, if somebody throws that inside a building, like you can kill people with that, right? This is important because this stuff is available online. It's available in person. You know, the store here in Milwaukee is just a store out in Butler. It's not a big town outside of the city, right? Curtis Blue Line sells it, right? Like this stuff is available. And it's really, really scary. And so this is why we're here. I am scared for my friends in Denver and Milwaukee and other places around the country, as well as Portland, where police officers, in advance of the protests tomorrow that are expected and beyond potentially, who have decided to arm themselves up with potential riot control agents like smoke, that they have gone and made the decision to buy a relatively inexpensive, labeled as safe, horribly toxic and lethal smoke that is actually a gaseous heavy metal. And so my friends around the country, if you see stuff like this, thankfully HC smoke burns very differently. It will burn hot for almost like 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. It will spew flames. Do not approach it unless you have full coverage. Dermal uptake, and as we saw, skin burns are real, right? So unless you have full skin coverage or are willing to risk that, stay out of the plume and let it burn itself out. Keep a gas mask on and handle it afterwards, right? Like I don't want people to die going up to one of these and dumping a bucket of water on it and having it explode heavy metal fumes on them, right? Like people could die from that. And so we need to prevent that from happening. And so thank you all for being here and listening to me talk for as long as I've talked. And at this point, I'm going to stop talking and say that all this stuff is available online at chemicalweaponsresearch.com/HC. And like I said, there's documents over in that bag, so feel free to take one. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Whew.
What would you say the long-term environmental impact is going to be?
That's a really great question. I'm going to repeat it so everybody can hear. Augustina asked, what do I think the long-term environmental impact will be? Significant. So we know from studies that I have a hyperlink to in the documents and are mentioned in the report that show that areas where this smoke was used in Norway during World War II, the trees had significant depression of their growth and have since had reduced growth over time. We know that zinc chloride basically makes bone growth and development a very difficult thing for salmon. And so you get reduced survival of young salmon, and those that do often have physical deformities that make it difficult for them to swim. Also, the chlorine the chlorine that's in the zinc chloride is an environmental pollutant and moves through the ecosystem in a way that is very aggressive, right? Like it's like dumping bleach in a space. it doesn't just go away, even though it's not still in the air so much. It's really aggressively interacting with things. And so the combination of that interaction and the heavy metals in particular mean that this is going to be a very long-term impact, and it's going to be pretty broad.
Is there a lot of research on the long-term effects on the human body?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, is there a lot of research on the long-term effects on the human body? And there is. So there's a paper that's, I have the, it's linked to in the report and all that. It's by El Idrisi in 2014. They did basically a meta-analysis of all of these different case studies, because it was like, this happened here and this happened here and this happened here, and they documented a lot of the symptoms that came early and then sort of mid and then longer term, and you basically see it's not lead poisoning. Your body can clear it. But it has significant effects on your liver and your kidneys in particular, because like stuff gets in through your skin, and so then it goes into your capillaries and then through your blood system and then through your liver. And so your liver ends up being the spot where the heavy metals get deposited, and then same on the way out in your kidneys. And so what I have read is that there's an increased risk of cancer in those particular organs, but then there's also just like the damage of impact. And I don't know if anybody's done necessarily like a reduction of lifetime, like lifespan or study, but there's been definitely tracking of individuals that have shown significant incidences of cancer. Yeah.
There have been a lot of reports from people that have been exposed to these chemicals of changes in their menstrual cycles and increased symptoms. Is there any research that indicates what chemicals are causing this, or what practical munitions or gases are causing this?
Totally. Yeah. So the question was about noting that a lot of people experienced significant alterations in their menstrual cycle when exposed to various chemical weapons. And that's a really important question. I would like to point out that there has been a body of research dating back to the 70s that shows that the CS molecule disrupts the endocrine cycle, which means it messes with the hormone cycle of mammals. This was shown in rats in the 1970s. So it boggles my mind, but I kind of understand the insidiousness behind why the story that's out there is that we don't know if CS is doing this, when the reality is that laboratory studies with like standard methodology give us information that we would presume that CS would be doing this, right? So CS in particular is an endocrine disruptor. The other molecules that we're often dealing with are not. The thing here that we're dealing with, hexachloroethane, the important thing is heavy metals, right? And so I'm concerned for folks who were pregnant, are pregnant, etc. Like, I don't know, like, I'm not a human physiologist. I don't know, all that stuff about what goes through into the baby and whatever, but like, that concerns me. It really, really concerns me. So CS is in particular there, but then this also does have impacts as well. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what it takes to remediate surfaces or mitigate the effects of CS or HC on, for instance, houses or furniture?
Totally. That's a really, really important question. So the question was, what do we know about remediating surfaces that have been impacted by chemical weapons? So like the park that we're standing on, or people's houses when these things get deployed in people's houses, or on somebody's house that happens to be a tent when that is right here as well. And the thing is that there hasn't been a lot of really good study on the long-term environmental movement of this stuff, and that's something that I'm particularly interested in trying to document. Like, I was curious, these things say that they can impact the environment. How do they get there? Where do they go? And it depends on the molecule. Some of them break down over time, more or less, but they break down into gnarly chemicals too. And the really big issue that I think we all need to be thinking about is the heavy metals that are associated with all of this. You know, Portlanders really got up in arms when we found out that there was a facility that was spewing heavy metal dust, right? Now we have a couple of agencies that are throwing heavy metals everywhere. And they're bringing it to you. It's not just in somebody else's backyard. They're bringing it to everybody's backyard. And so even when they throw a CS grenade, they are spewing a lot of heavy metals into the environment. And it is very difficult to remediate heavy metals in the environment, right? And so, again, these weapons weren't designed to be used in spaces like this. They were designed to be used in open fields of battle amongst tanks and out on the open ocean, right? Like that's where HC was designed to be used. So nobody cares about that. And so there's residues that sit on the ground and slowly get washed into the river.
I was thinking about specifically the children who were exposed in the southeast that got tear gas into their bedrooms when they were sleeping.
Exactly.
Because it seems like it'd be impossible to get out of carpet.
Exactly. And again, for me, that's the kind of stuff that I think we need to be thinking about getting folks to study, right? Like, obviously, there's a lot of research in this area and this is a great opportunity. So thank you all for being here to document me saying this. This is a clarion call. If you are a researcher who is interested in supporting the cause, there is more than enough research that needs to be done. Your city, our city, everybody's city, this stuff is being used and it's having impacts. And as we saw, the agencies who are using it and the standard media that are reporting it and the people who are manufacturing it are pretending as if it doesn't have an impact on you, on me, and on the environment. When we know that's clear and it's been well documented for 3/4 of a century, right? So we need scientists to break through this communication barrier and to do research on these impacts. And so if you are interested in supporting this cause, please reach out to me or start something in your city or wherever you are. The goal of the research consortium is to connect people so you don't have to go through what we went through. We created a munitions library that shows you all the things that we found, right? There's a lot of information out there. And I want everybody elsewhere to be safe and not have to go through what we went through over the better part of a year. One more question.
How have you personally been impacted by this?
What do you mean by this?
Well, I know that some of us were out here all summer.
Like
But-
personally exposed to HC or
I just mean personally, emotionally, doing all of this research. How have you been coping?
That's a great question. Thank you. So the question is how am I and how have I been coping when working on this stuff, which is admittedly really traumatizing, right? Because I am here and I was, attacked by DHS and was at home healing and seeing my friends and comrades being horribly attacked with some new mysterious weapon. And to be quite honest, I felt the most called to do this research than I ever have to do any other research in my entire life, because I saw that nobody was doing this work and the information that was getting out was not appropriate. And so sitting at home, not feeling safe being down here with DHS out, I knew that I had a space for me to jump in and feel like I could do something. And as we all know, we all move around in what we're doing. None of us stay doing the same thing through this movement. And it's very empowering, and it made me feel very good to feel like I had a motivation and a goal again. and to feel like there was something that specifically I could do to leverage the significant educational and background and privilege that I have experienced by being a middle-class white person in the Midwest, to bring the education and training that I have to bear to help people survive and to protect the environment, right? So for me, that is a major motivation that allows me to deal with a lot of this stuff, but it still has a huge impact. And it, reading through the case report, the after action report, where people were repeatedly saying things that I was reading again in these tweets again, and it's just it's so saddening, so understandable in capitalism, but so saddening that this is happening. And it's difficult, but I having a community of people that have done this work and are supporting it, and you all being here now, really helps me understand that other people are getting why this is important. And for me, that's the motivation right now, right? This information needs to get out to people. And so being able to communicate it properly so people understand is makes me feel good about myself. And so finding those kinds of things definitely help cope with dealing with, lethal gas being sold for $33 a piece. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people that I'm from Portland who have been dealing with this several months, for new places for J20, on what they can do to help themselves after they have been gassed when they get home?
Totally. So I think a really important thing is to try and cover as much of your skin as possible, even if you don't have Tyvek, right? If you have anything, it will prevent dermal uptake as much as possible of any of these things. We know these other smokes are also caustic, so definitely have stuff covered. If you get gassed, take that stuff off, don't put it in with your normal laundry, right? Put that separate. Whether you need to soak it to get it pre-rinsed or whatever you want to do to keep it clean, keep that separate from your normal laundry stuff. Definitely having as much of a full face covering as possible. So if you have a respirator or a gas mask, ideally. If you just have a mouth covering, definitely have something over your eyes. So whatever kind of goggles you have. But again, I don't think a lot of folks are going to have access to proper gear given what we know is happening in terms of the run on protective equipment right now. So I think the important thing is for everybody to manage and mitigate their risk, and to definitely get yourself as clean as possible with water as your best friend, high pressure, because it'll force things off. So if you've got a hose outside with a pressure nozzle, that's your best friend for getting clean. Don't hop in the shower right away. Get outside with a high pressure hose, right? And do your laundry separately. I think is going to be sort of your best bet, but also keep track of your when you've been exposed and what you've been exposed to. Whether you tweet or you journal or whatever you do. If you're out and you're exposed to something, document it, because as we've learned with the HC stuff, symptoms can come days later, right? And it can be difficult to piece that stuff together. But if you know that a couple days ago you were exposed to something and you didn't feel well, that'll really help you sort of piece things back together. So that would be my after sort of suggestion.
Do we know what kind of respirator types is best for stuff like this?
So I am not a great cartridge person, but what I do know is that you want, ideally, if you're gonna go that way, you really want a an organic vapor filter. However, as I've read through this, all of this stuff. And as we've been talking about, I have had a lot of discussions with my father, who's a retired hazmat lieutenant in Northern Illinois. He's a firefighter for 2.5 decades, and a hazmat firefighter for a lot of that. And he was like, situations like this is why firefighters have self-contained breathing apparatuses. Really, the only way to be safe around air here is to not be breathing it at all. Even the filters are not going to stop everything. Some of this stuff is like sulfur dioxides that can get like stuff. We're talking about very small molecules, right? We're not talking about CS or, you know, PAVA or that kind of stuff that are like bigger chemicals. We're talking about really small molecules. So like the kinds of filters that really can block that kind of stuff don't exist in any kind of price point for a general person, nor does a self-contained breather, right? Like none of that is safe. And so I think that's important for people to realize that like the breathing measures that you have to take around this stuff are pretty significant. So my suggestion would be, if you're like in the moment exposed to this, any of this kind of stuff, is to, as calmly as you can, move to an area where you can get as much fresh air as possible. Whether that's up in elevation or out to an open field, like that should be your goal. You want, like all of these things say, if you're exposed, if you inhale, like get fresh air, move to fresh air. Don't go inside, like don't go like kind of hide out under a awning or something like that. Like literally get to a spot where you can do deep breathing and get in a lot of fresh air, because you want to get this stuff out of your lungs before you like all of the gases permeate across. Awesome. Thank you all again so much. I really appreciate it. Please share this broadly and widely and have a lovely day. Thank you.